Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Commission Breath. Brandon Love here with Tom Moffat. And today we have a very special guest. You definitely have heard of him. Welcome, Dustan Woodhouse. We're stoked to have you on the show. So thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. So, Dustin, before we jump into things, I have to share a little story with you. So, while I was getting into brokering, I was a very, very broke farmer. And I ordered your books on Amazon and I was reading them. And my stepson saw me and he's like, Mom already says you're super broke. Like, why are you reading books on how to be broker? And I'm like, oh, no, it's not about that. But like, that's a fantastic chirp. So those books led a lot to my trajectory and growth in the industry. So I'm grateful to you for writing them and really happy to have you on the show today.
I appreciate that. And hey, I mean, my father proofread the first book for me, and he said, "Geez, kid, if you say it once, you say it 20 times. Don't be a broker. Brokering's tough." So
Yeah,
the fact that you read the book and then still jumped in, that says you like a challenge.
I do. I do indeed.
Yeah, and Brandon's gonna be pretty modest, but to give you context, he dove deep on your books, crushed them in a short period of time, and then you tell me the actual numbers, Brandon, but I think you hit your first 100 files in just over a year, something like that?
Yeah, I think it was just over a year. Went in pretty deep on it. I burned all the boats. I had nothing to lose, so I had no shame of hounding people and following up like crazy and working crazy hours because I was used to farming and not making any money. So
Yeah.
with brokering, you get a little bit of a taste of actually earning, and then you see there's no ceiling on things, and it's really just effort in these results. So I just went as far in as I could.
There's a lot to be said for, like you say, sort of burning the boats inadvertently, like you may have accidentally set fire to them. And you're just like, that was my story too. I mean, I had a gigantic mortgage, three extra mouths that I needed to feed, and like it had to happen. Like it
Yeah,
had to work. There was no option. And you just lean in and push so hard. But I always say be cautious because when you lean that hard on the throttle trying to get lift off and you get that lift off and it's great, a lot of times you sort of never learn how to ease up off that throttle and you just keep going and going and going and going. And has monetary upside, of course, but it can be a little bit much.
yeah, I think I definitely did that for the first couple years, and then it was like last year we were at a cottage or something, and my wife's like, "You've spent the whole time in the bunkie, underwriting files and like taking calls and doing meetings." She's like, "You haven't spent any time by the lake or with anyone." And I'm like, "Okay." I kind of reframed and reset a little bit, and now I think I have a little bit more balance. But I love the game, and I have a lot of fun with it. So it's kind of like one of those things that it's just part of life. So I try to involve my family where I can and get them excited about it too.
Those first few years, you don't really have an option. But
Yeah.
yeah, once you're up and cruising, man, you got options. Think about what you're doing.
Yeah, for me, similar story, but from a firefighting background. Your books, along with Scott Peckford's podcast, those were like my two Bibles getting into the industry and kind of just absorbed it all in a short period of time. And mine was more of a gradual progression because I was doing it part time for the first 3 years. So, same thing, like learned everything from your book and the podcast and just applied it to the business. And I was in a fortunate position where with my firefighting schedule, I did have a lot of days off to technically be a part-time broker, although it was mostly full-time hours at the time. Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things I'll take a moment because I highlight it everywhere I can right now. I mean, the book was written 10 years ago. Volume one was written 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I think anyone would have backed me up on saying, you can't do this part time, jump in, go. Because 10 years ago, if 10 people walked through your door, or realistically 10 people phoned you saying, hey, so and so told me to talk to you about a mortgage, like nice warm referrals, out of those 10, you could help between 7 and 9. You just could. I mean, oh, you've got $10,000 saved up and you make $45,000 a year and you want to buy a studio downtown Vancouver, no problem, I got you. And it worked. But now, amidst higher rates, record high prices, the stress test, all the policy changes, all of the different drama that's gone on in the regulatory environment and just with the pricing and inflation and whatnot, realistically, like, oh, you've got $30,000 saved up, you make $70,000 a year. Yeah, we might be able to find you something 30 to 40 kilometers away from the downtown core. like away from that income. And it's gone from, say, 7 to 9 out of 10 people you could help that would inquire. I'd say these days, you guys give me your experience, but I hear it's more like 3 in 10.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty spot on. We track our conversion rates, and whether it's you boil it down to people you can help, or if it's just your actual doing your job on converting the client, we're roughly around 30%. So that's 3 out of 10. Exactly.
And that's not a war on the home buyers from the lender's perspective. Like, lenders are in the business to lend. Lenders want to lend. They want to put the money out there. A lender is a shareholder-owned corporation. It's all about profit. Shareholders want a dividend. They want appreciation of that share price. So everybody in the system, aside from the government and the regulators, wants people to be able to be in homes and move forward. But step back, 6 years or so, and the leadership of CMHC at the time had a very aggressive mandate to limit demand. It was demand side economics. It didn't work in communist Russia. Turns out it didn't work in real estate market in Canada either. Right? They implemented all these demand side economic policies in 2017, in particular, the stress test onward. And oh, yeah, home prices have been flat since 2017. Good job, guys. Not, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's been brutal. And now we're in a situation where real estate ownership is increasingly only for the wealthy. It's only for the second, third generation real estate owners. And that's really unfortunate. And I don't think that's the desire of anyone who's setting policy, but it's the unintended consequence. It's the byproduct of the policies they're putting in place. So it's a tough market out there. So the part-time, full-time thing, just to be clear, if you're newer and you're still working at your other job, you probably should be, because it's a little tougher to get up and running at this point. It just is.
Yeah, having that bit of runway right now, I think, is super helpful, whether that's financial or just like putting aside those savings or having that steady paycheck that, okay, I'm going to have enough to cover my rent, my mortgage payment, feed the kids, pay for a piano lesson or hockey. And then anything brokering is upside. And then when it comes to a time where things, maybe they come back to normal, maybe they don't, maybe this is the new reality, but you can have that additional income added onto the pile.
Exactly.
Yeah, and since we're touching on it, obviously there's all of these different elements that make our life and career a lot tougher as a broker right now. Where do you see the opportunity for us in this market in terms of how do brokers pivot and make sure they thrive and succeed in a market like today?
Oh, well, thanks for the softball question there, Tom.
We can start small.
I thought we were going to talk about conferences. I thought that was what the email.
I
Hey,
know it's
you
too
want to come
juicy.
talk
We
about
gotta keep going.
conferences? And the irony in that was, I don't even think you guys knew that I was putting a conference together. And I was like, yes, let's
Yeah.
talk about. But okay, I won't duck the question. I won't be a politician on that one. I'll actually answer the question. The opportunities, to some extent, are where they've always been. There's, just as we were just discussing, you got to go deeper to get to them. So, to use the old Napoleon Hill Think and Grow Rich reference to being 3 feet from gold, about the gold miner that like pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and then he stopped and sold his claim. Turned out the new owners only had to go 3 feet further, and they hit the all-time richest claim in the Yukon. I mean, imagine being that guy. It's like selling your winning lottery ticket for 10 cents and not realizing. I think that there's a little bit of that dynamic where it is, as they say, a numbers game. I hate the word leads, prefer clients. They're actually human beings or families. Typically, they're genuine people looking to buy a property. But there's a lot of people out there selling leads. There's brokers out there buying leads. And where it used to be 10 leads converted to one funded mortgage, and then it was 20, the stats I'm hearing these days, like if you're just buying leads, it's 30 to 40 leads to close one, typically. And now, again, that depends on how are you trying to close them. If you're only looking for A clients, it's probably 50 to 1. If you're open to the B lending side, to the mix, to the privates, well, then you might get closer to a 1 in 20 or even a 1 in 10 close if you've got a more versatile toolbox. So I think there's a couple things that I'm trying to unpack there. One, you probably got to make more outbound calls than ever. Two, you probably have to intake more complete applications. than ever. I just had a conversation with a broker recently, and they were telling me how their application to funded ratio was 95%, meaning 95% of applications they take fund. Only 1 in 20 doesn't fund. And I said, you're doing it wrong. Like, you should have 40 applications to fund 20. I mean, you're not throwing enough applications into the mix. You're not trying hard enough. And to be fair to them, they're very comfortable in what they do. They're very focused on a business specifically. And so they don't even take the application in unless they know it's going to go to the A side. I think we all in this industry have to broaden our horizons. And I don't think I'm saying anything that 9 out of 10 brokers are not clear on. I mean, you've got to have not just 2 or 3 A lenders that you understand their products perfectly. You've got to have 2 or 3 B lenders. You've got to have 2 or 3 mix. And you probably have to have 2 or 3 private lenders. And a private and a MIC are not the same thing, as we know. There's a nuance there. And yeah, you're probably up to a dozen different potential lending solutions, and throw in the reverse mortgage conversation in there as well. You've got to be prepared to look at every possible creative solution and ask questions that don't always get asked, right up front. What about a cosigner? Right? What about a gifted down payment? What about a gifted down payment from the other half of the family? You've got to dig further. And I always remember, I'll give Joel Olson the shout out. I always remember Joel saying one time, you do not realize, and clients themselves do not realize, how far they will go to save a deal once they're in it.
Mm.
And so why not get those questions out of the way up front? Why wait until you're in the 11th hour and now you're scrambling for a cosigner or an additional gifted
Yeah.
down payment the day of subject removal? Why not have those conversations earlier? Like, let's be over prepared.
I think taking it as an opportunity, all these things in challenging times that you're learning more about different products, you're acquiring new skills, you're learning how to have a better discovery call, how to get to know that client better, suggest solutions, or have uncomfortable conversations with them. Everything you gain here during trying time, when it comes to a more bountiful time, you're going to be miles ahead. So, this is all preparation for a future time where all of a sudden, maybe that conversion rate is going to be back to 7 to 9 out of 10 deals because you've picked up all these skills along the way in preparation for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's the other opinion too that I hear and see from other brokers is that instead of being broader and having your private B and A side and being proficient in all three, a lot of people will say, "Hey, pick one, go all in on that." But I think now is a different time, and I agree with you, Dustin, to the point like we're seeing files that should be A, but then they're just kind of gravitating towards the B space after speaking with them. So like to throw away that file is kind of stupid, to be quite honest. So I think having your set lenders in each category and be proficient with it, completely agree. Let's pivot to what we wanted to chat about here today and talk about conferences because we do have the MPC coming up. And I thought I'd reach out to you because you are the master at conferencing, in my opinion, based off of your past blogs and your book itself, your books, that is. And so, why don't we start off like why go to conferences? Like, how would that benefit a broker?
Yeah. I mean, I've certainly heard the line, well, I'm not going to pick up any business there. It's not like there's going to be clients there, which again, like, just, it's amazing to me how short-sighted and narrow-minded people are. It shocks me. I remember reaching out to a bank MMS, one of the bigger banks, saying, "Hey, would you like to grab a coffee?" And he literally replied to me, "Why would I ever get coffee with a broker? What could you possibly do for me? No thanks." I replied to him, I'm like, "You asked a question that I actually could have answered, but okay." And I subsequently connected with another MMS, and the two of us have, over the past 10 plus years, conservatively, conservatively flowed about $50 million worth of volume to one another.
Wow.
Wow.
So I would love to send, like a statement with that volume on it to that first gentleman that was like, no. The guy left a 500,000 on the table. Like,
Yeah.
bizarre. So there's business opportunity everywhere. But not only that, I mean, going to industry events in particular, okay, great, you've got the application. Now, how are you getting it across the finish line? And I always say, if the typical Canadian home buyer out there understood how fickle the underwriting process of a mortgage is, like there's a lot of human beings in the process, right? There's multiple human beings in that process, and those human beings are having different things happening in their lives. They have different outlooks on different aspects of the world, and it all impacts whether or not that person qualifies. And I remember kind of explaining one time to a client that this is going to come down to how well the underwriter slept last night. And they were like, "What are you even saying? This is the home for our family. And you're telling me that if someone got a bad night's sleep, we're not going to get our home today?" Like, I realized I really shouldn't have said what I
It's so
said.
true though.
Pulled the curtain back a little too far. But that's the reality. And so, what am I really saying there? I'm saying relationships matter. And when you can go to an event where not just your BDMs are there, but some of the actual underwriters are there, and you can meet them and humanize yourself, hopefully, and not be too human. But you can have that little bit of a connecting conversation, and maybe you have something in common, like you both play the ukulele or whatever it might be. A lot of times it's funny little things, but now we kind of know one another, and maybe we kind of like one another or have a respect for one another or whatever it might be, and those things help. And the industry is full of people moving around all the time. I mean, I had people make my life miserable while I was a broker, and then fast forward 5 years later, I'm the president of a network, and that person is unbelievably dependent upon me all of a sudden. And there's some really interesting social dynamics that go on. So, big picture, conferences are great because you're building out your internal network of people inside the industry who may or may not be able to help you, get that file across the finish line, because we're an industry of exceptions,
Mhm.
right? Exceptions, exceptions, exceptions. But I really boil it down to some key points that I'd want to make, because I guess your audience is probably a little bit of everything. People who
Yeah.
are brand new, people who've been at 5 years, 10 years. If you're newer in the industry, you tend to have more time than money. So there's no excuse for not going to reasonably priced local conferences, like anything mortgage, real estate, finance related, chamber of commerce events, industry association events. There's no excuse to not be there. Be there. As you get busier, you get into a zone where now you have more money and you could maybe afford to get on the plane and fly to Toronto or Montreal or fly out to Vancouver, depending on where you are, to these different events. You can afford the airfare, you can afford the hotel, you can afford the whole experience, because suddenly that $500 to $1,000, $1,500 conference, suddenly it's actually costing $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 by the time the smoke clears. But you're struggling with the time. And in either one of those scenarios, you're very rarely in that sweet spot where you have enough time and money. Usually you're always shy on one of those two resources. But in either one of those situations, you probably need to go to these events. You probably do, because if you're short on money, it's probably going to help you fund more files going to these events. You're going to listen to people talk about the actual sales process. You're going to learn which lender does what. Like, there's a lot to be gained from that. And then when you're short on time, there's a lot of value in going to those events because there's other people there who were as short on time as you, or maybe are struggling with the same thing. And you can connect with them and hash out solutions. But again, you got to be a little bit social at these things.
Mhm.
And of course, unfortunately, myself included, what makes us a little more social, especially if you're a little introverted and a little uncomfortable, what helps? What helps loosen you up a little bit?
Couple pops there.
Yeah, yeah. I'll just have a couple of
Couple
drinks.
Negronis.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my first major conference, I got back home at 5 o'clock in the morning. Somehow I had wound up, out at a couple different clubs, and then for a breakfast with like a group of five brokers. And I got home, and my wife at the time was like, so a lot of mortgage discussions to be had at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Like, seriously, not awesome. And I probably talked a lot of crap as well between, let's say, midnight and 5 a.m.
Mhm. Hopefully you took notes during the day because you probably don't remember
Yeah.
anything.
I mean, that's the only thing you hope. You hope everyone's on the same level and nobody remembers anything, right?
Yeah.
But I would say, hey, look, I'm coming up on 10 years since I made the decision. Really, it was a bet to take a year off drinking, and then I just never went back. So for me, it's ancient history at this point, and I just won't go back. It's been a benefit. But hey, I don't judge anybody. I was 42 before I quit drinking.
Right.
You want to drink, but if you're going to drink to excess, do it in a safe space, which I would at this point have to say is with friends or family where everyone's locked their phones in a lead box and you're out in the woods and you've known these people for 20 years. That might be the safe place at this point. But a work event, it's just it's not good. And so here's the line that will hopefully stick in the minds of your listeners. Don't be that guy. Don't be that girl. And you know what I'm talking about. The next morning at breakfast, did you see that guy? Like, you don't want to be that guy, right? Is it How I Met Your Mother, I think, where he says, nothing good happens after midnight, kids.
Very true. I feel like for me personally, I can't even get to that point. Maybe it's because I have young kids now. I just like, I get so sleepy and tired that I know if I get past, say, 3 drinks, I'm just done for the night. So I usually cut myself off at that point. So, yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think you always do have those people. It doesn't matter what industry, you're always going to have
Yeah,
that guy or that girl.
it's not industry specific. It's human
Yeah.
specific.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And look, to tie it to something more practical, business cards. Business cards aren't done, they're not over. When you go to events, yes, you can take your phone and you can hold it against the other person's phone and it swaps contact cards. Good luck finding that contact card ever again. Because, shoot, I've forgotten their name now. Did you go into that contact card and add notes like MPC 2024 or whatever? You probably didn't because you were in the middle of a conversation. You just tapped phones and you both went, wow, that's kind of cool, and walked away. And now, who was that person? You don't even know. So, business cards with your face on them, because it is much more difficult for a human being to throw away a card with someone else's face on it. If you look at all the collection of business cards you still have floating around, it's almost always the ones with faces on them.
True.
And that way, you remember. You remember who the heck it was you were talking to. So you should be armed with business cards and you should ask for business cards wherever possible. And then when you go back up to your room at 10 o'clock at night, like a good student of the game, you sit down, you pull out all those business cards, and you fire off a quick email with a delayed delivery. Don't email them at 10 o'clock at night, right? Delay delivery it until maybe the day after the conference at 9:13 a.m. and just say, hey, it was really great to meet you. I look forward to connecting again sometime. Maybe we could set up a meeting, a Zoom, a coffee, whatever that might be. Follow up, follow up, follow up, and also connect with them on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
If not other social media platforms, the basics, LinkedIn. And yeah, I'm the boring dude that has done that between 10 and midnight at many a conference, especially over the past 10 years. And it's served me really well.
Yeah.
Like, most people don't follow up. Oh, hey, we should get together sometime. Yeah, we should. All right, see ya. And you never talk to them again. Happens all.
There's people in the industry, I know they've built their business off of doing just that, and they just get a lot of co-broker files because they position themselves as an expert in a certain field. Like, for example, they position themselves as like one of the best underwriters in the industry, and if a broker can't get a file done, they think of that person, and they've built these connections through the industry. So yeah, there's many different ways you can take that, whether you're a new agent and you want to connect with someone that is a high producer and maybe like as a mentor, or maybe you are a high producer and you want to connect with someone like minded and start a little mini mastermind. There's so many different angles you could take it.
Conferences have different flavors to them as well. Like, different events have different flavors. Like, local events, provincial, national, there's unique aspects to each of them. And it's not easy to extract value out of a conference. You actually have to work at it.
I'm curious about that because like I'm a pretty outgoing guy, but I find sometimes put me in like a conference setting or like I went to one of the mortgage awards a few years ago, and I only knew like one or two people directly there. And I was like, how do I kind of put myself in this room? And I felt like I was kind of like at a high school dance standing against the back wall, or and I like went into my shell a bit, which is the wrong approach, obviously, to that setting. But like, is there anything you would suggest for people who might have a similar experience of how to step outside of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't even go to the high school dances because I was so damn awkward. So, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's been more than one event that I have sat outside in my car or stood outside and kind of eyeballed and just been like, oh man, do I have to go in here? And, for me, odds are I actually know 50% of the people in there, if not more. I still have to overcome that because I'm an introvert at heart. People don't believe it because I like to get up on a stage and, the podcast and all these different things. But those things drain me, right? Like I'm going to go have a nap after this. That's the reality. Like those things don't fill me up a lot. But here's the thing, we're not in high school anymore. We're not in junior high school anymore. We're grown ass adults. And here's the key point I would make: everyone is approachable. Everyone is approachable. You can walk up to anyone in this industry, you, the listener, you can walk up to anyone in this industry and introduce yourself. The conversation will just flow from there. Hey, Brandon, my name's Dustin. I'm from Vancouver. I'm a broker. Whereabouts are you from? And that's it, right? Just have a couple basic questions in your mind like, oh, yeah, I'm going to ask them where they're from. I'm going to ask them how long they've been in the business. I'm going to ask them what other roles they've played in this business, if any. Just a couple basic questions in your mind. Maybe you even have them on like a little note stuck in your pocket of your blazer or whatever to remind yourself, like, yeah, I'm going to ask them how long they've been in the business, whereabouts are they from, have they done any other roles, played any other roles in the real estate industry or the finance industry. And there it is. And within those few questions, you almost always find something in common, right? Like if you're not from the same city, you know someone else from that city, or your grandmother was born there, or whatever. Human beings actually want to connect. As I say, everyone is approachable. I've got messages from people after a conference. Oh, I saw you at the conference and I wanted to come up and say hi, but I just didn't. It's like, why? Now I realize I walk around with a bad case of RBF. I look like I'm pissed off all the time and I forget to smile, right? To remind myself. And I smile and I'm like, now I feel like I look like a psychopath.
Yeah, then you're in your
It's
head.
not
Yeah.
natural. Yeah, I live inside my head. And so I'll take this moment to say, hey, if you see me and I look like I'm grumpy, you can come say, I know you're not grumpy because I am approachable and I'm happy to have a conversation. Everyone in
Yeah.
the industry is. That's the other thing I would say about our industry, that it is actually unique. Our industry is full of people willing to share. There's a few weirdos that don't want to share anything. And I call them weirdos because they're weird. I mean, like, what are you thinking? If you're a big hitter, you're getting, say, 200, 300 files a year or whatever in your market. Your market probably has somewhere between 25 and 125,000 transactions happening every year. You're worried about the odds of some other broker tripping over one of the 200 out of 120,000 that you're working on. Like, brokers virtually never trip over one another. Now a whole
Yeah.
bunch of people are going, "Oh, but this one time." Yeah.
It
The
happens
one
so
time.
rarely. Like it's always the bank. It's hardly ever another mortgage broker that you're in competition with.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
And to
right.
be a gatekeeper to that strategy, also like to take it one step further, that broker would have to not be able to service the client, and then for them to then find you as the gatekeeper of this great strategy, which if you're not sharing it, you're probably not doing a fantastic job of marketing the strategy as well. So yeah, I think that the industry, it's blown my mind how open people are to share things, even coming onto the show and just giving their full like winning strategy for what they've done to compete with banks this year. And like they're sharing it with everyone. They don't know who's listening. And additionally, going back to the conference piece, I think that mindset of like being a little bit introverted, there's definitely dozens of other people in a similar boat just waiting for someone to come up and strike that conversation with them. I think you make a great point there of just having those few prompts that get you in the room and get you started. And then from there, you just feed off one another. Someone else jumps in, an introduction's made, and it just all grows from there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd be walking up saying, "Hey, I'm Dustin. I'm from Vancouver, and well, technically Squamish, but I'll say Vancouver because it's just easier for people outside of BC, right?" I'd be like, "Hey, I'm Dustin from Vancouver, and I'm huh, I don't know what I'm doing in this industry right now, but I've been in it for 16 years. I've done a lot of different things. Tell me about yourself." But yeah, having your own quick little 5-second intro. That's all it takes.
So, on the topic of that, you're a free man right now. Your presidential duties are done. What's going on? I know we've touched on conferences and I know you have an event coming on. So, I think we should share that with the listeners because it sounds pretty cool. And we did not tee this up. Tom reached out to Dustin and then we are like, we want to talk about conferences. And he's like, oh, this works out perfectly. I have an event coming up as well. So, I think it's a perfect opportunity to shed some light on that too.
Well, here's what I'll say. I'm not a huge self promotion guy, so I'm not going to turn this into an infomercial at all. I want to share a few thoughts here for other people who organize conferences in general, because having gone to so many events over the past, nearly 20 years in this industry, well, I'm rounding up now, 16 years in this industry, I've gone to a lot of events and seen a lot of things that have been done really well, and then seen a lot of things that you're just kind of like, oh. And some of those things happen over and over and over. You're like, can't we fix this? Why does this keep happening? And so I took some of those things and I just thought, I'm just going to do my own thing. It started with the workshops like 6 years ago. I thought, hey, I'll reach out to the associations and see if they want to put a broker on stage to talk about brokering. And as it turns out, most associations, you'll notice, do not put brokers up on stage, certainly never on the main stage, to talk about brokering, which is kind of weird. Like, aren't we there to talk about brokering? I mean, astronauts are great. The motivational thing is great, but man, if you need motivation, like you're in the wrong industry. Like, you better be already motivated like crazy. What I think we need more of is education on what's happening in the market, what's happening at different levels of government. So, yeah, I realized, okay, well, they're not going to put a broker on stage, and they're certainly never going to pay a broker to be on stage. So that's not a viable career path. So I created some of my own workshops, and I would do these 2-day, 6-hour per day, 300 slide per day days of just an intense monologue. And they were a lot of fun. Then I went and did the whole presidential thing for 5.5 years. So that kind of got put on pause. But during that time, I had a provision in my contract where I could host one Be the Better Broker event per year. So that started in 2022, and we did a virtual event. And then 2023, we did virtual again. But in the middle of that event, I basically said, you know what, let's get together in person. Let's do a live thing. And so 2024, February, we did the first live in person Be the Better Broker conference. We did it in Whistler because I wanted to do it in a small environment where the delegates couldn't all disperse off into a city of 1 million+ people and never trip over one another. And certainly it worked out really well that way. So having it in that small little village, everybody kept bumping into everybody. And there was only 147 of us there for the first one. Attendance for the 2025 event coming up is capped at 200. So it's going to be a small, somewhat exclusive event again. And I'm confident that we will be fully sold out here shortly. So that's the good news there. But one of the other aspects, as I say, that I would share around these events, if it's happening on a weekday, you can't put people in a chair for 2 hours solid. You got to give people breaks. And so we've run a 45-minute on, 15-minute off format all the way back to my workshops in 2017 and 2018. And the feedback from that, any conference organizers, please listen to what I'm saying. Like, the feedback from hundreds of people is so positive. 45 minutes, the phone is not in your hand. The phone is not on your desk. The phone is out of sight. There's no phones visible. 45 minutes, you're laser focused in on what's actually happening from the stage. And then bang, you have 15 minutes, pull your phone out, return those calls, return the emails, return the text, do whatever you got to do, and then come back. And we do that for 3 hours in the morning, 75-minute lunch, 3 hours in the afternoon. At the end of the day, I always hear the same thing, the opposite of what I hear at other events. I hear, man, like I'm still like super under control. I'm not stressed out. And I absorbed more today from this event than I've ever absorbed ever because people weren't sitting there on their phones the whole time. And you got people up and moving. So I
Mhm.
find that 45 on, 15 off. And by the way, that was kind of a lift from my own process when I was brokering. I'd laser in for 45 minutes. Okay, it was usually 55 minutes. And then I'd get up and move around for 5 minutes. Walk out into the street, get some fresh air. Or, okay, it's Vancouver, might be some fresh rain. Move, walk around the block every hour on the hour, which, by the way, lowers your chances of all cause mortality radically. Just getting up and moving. Even this, I'm shooting standing up. Like I never sit down for Zooms or podcasts or anything because it's a great excuse to be on my feet. So that's an important aspect of it. And giving people time to interact with one another and talk about what they just absorbed. So yeah, I'm like a little bit of a student of conferences and I'm trying to apply it to this Whistler event.
Yeah, I love that because I have like terrible ADHD. So when I'm sitting in a chair, I'm like, it takes me right back to school. I get so bored. Even if it's a really engaging topic, I'm lost because I'm like, oh, I've been in this chair for an hour and I just get all squirrely. So I love that you're breaking that up. That's something that more people should listen to and apply. Going deeper on that event, like what are some of the things you're focusing on that the other conferences are missing?
Well, I'll touch quickly on last year. So last year's keynote was Stephen Poloz, the former Bank of Canada governor. And the man was just so cool. Like he hung out at the social, had a beer, took some selfies with people, joined us for breakfast. He hung out at the mastermind breakout sessions and sat in on different group segments. It was phenomenal how involved and accessible he was, which again kind of goes to it being a smaller group. In a group of 1,200, an
Yeah,
audience of 1,200, it would have been exit stage left, poof, gone.
true.
It's such a small, intimate feeling event. We had a lot of great interaction with that. And so we had, the Bank of Canada governor, we had the CMHC chief economist, Bob Dugan, we had a TD private wealth strategist. We had some real high level, think tank type stuff. And it was really good intel. This year, we're going to pivot a little bit more towards like actual in the weeds tactics, tactics, tactics. So we've got some great sales trainers that'll be there. Yvonne Juanes Ruiz was my MC with the most energy I've ever seen last year. He's going to be back. And he does some great sales training stuff. Perry Sean will be there doing some fantastic sales training as well. We do have an economist. We added the chief economist of TD. She's going to be there. I'm looking forward to that. And then Dr. Robin Hanley Defoe, who is the author of a book called Stress Wisely, who talks about stress and how a little bit of stress is a good thing. Too much is a bad thing, and too little is a bad thing. Life can't be too easy. Kind of brings our conversation full circle. Like Brandon, you had to succeed. You had stress, and that stress was good for your career, right? Like it forced you. Tom, you were part time for 3 years because you had an income. You had this job. You had a good gig going that was so good. You were like,
Yeah.
I can imagine for a little bit, you were like, geez, I don't know. Am I really going to leave this? Like, this is a
Very
really
long time.
good
Yeah.
gig.
Yeah.
And so, you had lower stress, but then you probably started to see the bigger opportunity. Okay, actually, I can do this. This is actually going to take me down a more interesting path. So anyway, yeah, Dr. Robin Hamley Defoe is going to run some workshops, not just presentation, but we're actually going to do, again, all of the speakers. It's going to be all about being as interactive, more workshopping than presenting, right? More interacting than telling. And so again, like I'm just trying to create this sort of intimate event where a couple hundred, a lot of them are top producers because it's expensive to get yourself to Whistler. Although I will say, damn, if you live in Vancouver, if you live in Squamish or Whistler, like if you're on the West Coast here, this is the least expensive, biggest bang for the buck type of industry event you're going to have access to. Like it's right there. And yet I have people from Vancouver saying to me, well, why don't you host it in Las Vegas? I'm like, really? That would be easier? It's a 2-hour drive.
Well, I think the theme of it is a bit different too. Like, isn't there like a spa aspect to it? Or am I mistaken on that?
I mean, obviously you're in Whistler. So a lot of
Yeah.
people think that means everyone must be going skiing. No. So the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's all in, intensive days. A lot of people are coming in Monday, Tuesday. A lot of people are staying Saturday, Sunday and getting together in groups where, yeah, I think there was like 24 people or something that took over the Scandinave spa for a full
Sweet.
half day. Yeah. And then there were a dozen of us that went up, and it was hilarious because, imagine a dozen high producing broker personalities skiing together. And no one's asking anyone how they feel about the next run. Do you want to take a break? Like, there's none of that. It was
Yeah.
onto the chair, up. One person would just be like, let's go this way. And we'd just go. And then you're back on the chair. And it was like every run was a race. It was a little bit too intense. I thought, okay, if we're going to have a bigger contingent of potential skiers next year who hang back for the extra day to get on the slopes, we're going to have like two groups.
Yeah.
The normal people and the AAA, crazy alphas. One of the brokers, she actually won the Sudan Couloir race last year.
That's a different level of intensity.
Yeah.
Like Tom and I did a little ski trip last year, but we weren't bombing anything too
Yeah, definitely
crazy.
not. Definitely not. A little slow cruise down the hill.
Yeah.
You're mentioning a lot of not top producers, but a lot of experienced brokers are coming to your event. Is there any restrictions on new brokers coming? Is it more so just the price where you don't see them coming? Is it kind of like a cap there?
No, it's interesting. It was a healthy mix last year. So there were people who'd only been in the business a year or two. I tried to have a conversation with pretty well every single person at some point about the event and what they thought and why they were there and everything else. And I definitely made a point of, names that I didn't recognize. I'm like, maybe you're newer to the industry or whatever. And sure enough, there were a few. And they said to me, I want to go where the top producers are because I want to have an opportunity to ask them questions.
Mhm.
Like what would they do if they were me now? Not so much, what did you do to become
Right.
successful? Because becoming successful in 2008, a lot different than becoming successful in 2024. So as you see the landscape today, what would you do if you were me? And I was like, wow, you are one super smart woman. And then, yeah, there were absolutely some of the biggest names in the industry running billion-dollar plus teams, and you'd think, they're already there. They're super successful. Like, why are they coming to this event? And they're coming for a variety of reasons, but overwhelmingly, it was to improve. Like, we all have these areas. I mean, I've always looked at myself, and I probably always will, as a work in progress. Like, there's a lot of stuff I really want to be better at.
I think this is an industry that you always have to be constantly learning and willing to evolve and change yourself. And I think the conferences, yours especially, and the other ones out there, do allow an opportunity for you to take new insights in and tweak your business and evolve it. Because if you do the same thing, even if we did the same thing we did 3 years ago, it's not going to work anymore, or it's going to work a lot less effectively. Willing to be adaptable and take new things in. There's a saying I love. It's like the ignorant and the dead never change.
Yeah. I like Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys version of it. I'd rather be called a hypocrite than stay the same person forever.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I like yours too, though. That's pretty good. I think you really hit the nail on the head with where life is at right now. Like, we all have to be constantly improving and evolving and adapting. But at the same time, there are the things that never ever change. And there's a reason people will show up at an in person event. And that reason is human connection. That reason is the relationship piece that you can't build over the phone, through email, through Zoom. Like, there is a value to showing up in person. Says the guy who absolutely for 12 plus years now has pushed telephone, 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 stop meeting clients in person. But to be clear, my office was in a lawyer's office, and I funneled 99% of my clients into that specific lawyer's office to sign their final documents. And my office was right next to the two signing rooms, which, when anything was going a little sideways at signing, was really, really helpful. But also, I'd have the door open to my office because I would hear the receptionist, saying hello to my clients who I'd never met in person. That's also where the whole suit up and show up piece came in. I had to be suited up every single day because I'm probably meeting clients at typically peak happiness. So rather than going and meeting 10 people at Starbucks, 7 of whom never even become my client, I would meet my happy clients who were signing their documents and getting their new home, getting their new financing, whatever it was, right in that moment of peak happiness. Definitely, it made a difference around the referral piece. So I'm not opposed to meeting clients in person. There's value there. It's just at what point are you getting the maximum value?
Mhm.
There's only so many hours in the day, guys.
Yeah, I saw a broker, or we interviewed them recently, and they talked a lot about there's the phone conversation is really valuable, but then you want to take it a step above, make it a Zoom conversation. So now it's a little bit face to face, a bit more personal, and then find a time to interject, like you said, when you can have that like moment of wow. So like a signing
Yeah.
appointment's a great opportunity. There's other opportunities in there that you're like, hey, I'm here now. Great to meet you in person. And it's so sticky because then all of a sudden they're not leaving, you know, a mortgage with love for RBC. They're leaving Brandon, who they've met in person and they have a relationship with. They've seen a picture of his kid, whatever it is, for RBC. It's stickier that way.
Yeah, I mean, the signing of the commitment and the compliance documents, it's a great opportunity to meet in person. Here's a story for you. I don't know, maybe on my 11th mortgage ever. And you'll learn things as you go along. And you'll figure out what I hadn't learned here pretty quick. So I arranged to come over to their home, the client's home, to have all the documents signed for the new place that they're going to be moving to. Go over to their current place, sit down at the kitchen table. I've got 3 prepared stacks of documents, one for me, one for him, one for her. We're all going to have our own stack, and I'm going to have them each signing and then swapping. So we wind up with all the signatures that we need. And I'm thinking like everything's predated. I've got little stars stamped on all the pages where signatures and initials and little high points, the collateral charge. Let's talk about that. And we sit down, and one of the applicants immediately starts flipping forward through the pages. And I say, don't skip ahead. We're going to process here. It's going to be good. And they're like, okay. They're still peeking ahead. We get through the first page. And then as we're about to get to the second page, they say, honey, I think I just heard the baby cry. Could you run up and check on the baby? Like it was like you could hear a pin drop. There was no sound that had occurred. And they're like, please, please go. So the one party runs upstairs to check on the baby. The other one quickly rips page 3 out of the stack of their partners, page 3 out of their stack, and says, this page got stuck in the printer, stash it now. I didn't do the whole, wait, why? Like,
Yeah.
you roll with it. Like, you're in someone else's house, they're telling you
Yeah.
to do a thing, you do that thing. I'm like, no problem. I fold them up quick, stick them in my pocket. They come back downstairs. We go through page 2. We turn the page. And in my best, Academy Award winning acting, I'm like, oh my, I can't believe this, guys. I don't have page 3 here. And the one who told me to pluck page 3 out is like, I really expected to be more organized.
Come
Oh,
on. Come on.
I was cool with it. I was like, this is great. Like, they're definitely bringing some emotion out in me on that point. And I'm like, I thought so too. I really thought I had it together. I could swear I went through these stacks like 3 times to make sure I could impress you. I'm like, look, it's late. We should maybe get together earlier in the day anyway. I tell you what, could we meet at one of your offices tomorrow mid morning? And they were like, sure, that's fine. So I leave the next morning, first thing, one partner goes off to work, the other one phones me right away. They cannot know about this debt.
Mm.
I'm like, well, the mortgage is not going to be approved without that debt paid out because the numbers don't work. And I can ask the lender to remove the list of debts that need to be paid from the actual commitment. They might do that, but ultimately, like, we still got to address it. And the lender worked with me and removed the list. So they pulled that out. They managed to reach out to family to help them clear the debt in the background, and it all got handled. And that puts you in this really interesting scenario of like, who am I obligated to disclose things to?
Mm.
And so I would say never forget that an individual's credit report is an individual's credit report. Don't pull the credit together. Don't pull it as a joint credit application. Always pull their credit individually. Always pull the credit separately, and always have the conversation about any debts you see on there individually. Like, try and catch those people when they're off at work or they're somewhere where they're not with their partner, and just walk through the debts. Because, yes, there's an awful lot of partnerships out there where one does not know the other one's situation. And no, it's not our job to divulge that information. There is a privacy expectation. Anyway, yeah, it was an interesting moment in time.
I did something similar, Dustin, but I put my foot in my mouth way worse. I recorded a Loom video doing the
I've done the same.
refinance and going over the liabilities. And the wife called me and she was like, "What the F? He doesn't know about all my spending." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, delete the video. So I deleted the video, and then the husband's like, "The video's not working. Can you resend it?" And I'm like, no, I can't." Like, so it was just like backpedaling like crazy. And she's like, "I gotta have a conversation with him. Like, I meant to do it, but I've just been putting it off." I'm like, "Okay, well, that was my bad, and I'm sorry." But also, it blows your mind what people don't know about who they share a bed with.
Don't assume, right?
Yeah.
Don't assume just because you think you know everything that A, you do know everything about your partner, but B, yeah, don't assume that everyone knows everything about their partner, because it's not the case. And yeah, I mean, on that note, I think I have put a post out around Valentine's Day a few years in a row talking about credit score compatibility. It's a real thing. Like, opposites don't attract when it comes to credit scores.
Yeah, that's true. If they are attracted in one way, the credit score can often be the divide.
Yeah. Oh, it's an insurmountable hurdle for a lot of people, because it's just, how you do one thing is how you do everything. There's a lot of ad libs I could stack on top of what I just said there, but the reality is you get more than 100, 150 points apart in credit scores. Like, you get into the 250, 350 point spread difference. It's a major problem. And for anyone listening to this who's in a relationship with someone who has a wonderful credit score, or at least you believe they do, and yours is a disaster, frankly, the sooner you rip that band aid off, the better. Because if that person has a great credit score and they care about you and you care about them and you want to fix it, you'll find a way forward together to fix it, and not only fix the problem, but fix the root cause in most cases. And I do know couples who've gone to credit counseling together, basically was like a version of marriage counseling, and have come out the other side financially way stronger, but emotionally way stronger. So there you
Yeah,
go.
we might have inadvertently just started like a matchmaking service where we just get people on the first date, pull their bureaus, and then we're like, "Okay, well, we'll set up these dates here.
Yeah.
There's a new
There's a
business
new
brand.
business there. Don't worry about the 50 bips on 3-year fix. We have a new business for everyone here. Take it to your city."
Yeah.
Well, Dustin, thank you for jumping on with us today. I think we covered quite a range of topics. I know Tom hit you with the curveball there. That was fantastic to get your insights. And I think for the conference piece, a lot of my takeaways here are just really don't be afraid to put yourself out there and show up prepared and leave and take action. Don't just leave and have a couple beers and go on with life. Leave and follow up with those people, establish those relationships, because the difference between getting your next deal funded, finding your next industry partner, be it a lender or a brokerage, etc., and just take as much as you can from these relationships you build.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys both. And yeah, the next time any of you see me at a conference and I look like I'm a grumpy bastard over in the corner, I'm not. I'm not. I'm just thinking about something. Come up and say hello. Hopefully, I'll see you guys in Whistler, February 2025.
Yeah.
And we'll also have the link to the conference in the show notes here for everyone.
Appreciate it. I'm easy to find. Google.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thanks,
All right,
Justin.
guys. Thanks very much.